Hey guys, tonight we're taking a step, well, more like a squelch into medieval Europe, during one of the most confusing and chaotic times in history, the Age of Plagues. You're not a knight or a noble. Nope, you're just you, a regular person, with sore feet, questionable hygiene, and absolutely no idea what a germ is. Spoiler alert, you might not make it past day one, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe it, only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know in the comments, what city are you in, and what time is it where you are? Are you already in bed, or pretending you're not watching this from the toilet? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a narrow dirt path, your boots soaked through with a mixture of rainwater, horse droppings, and you are pretty. Surreal crushed slug. It's spring, or maybe late winter. Time is slippery here. There's no calendar app, no morning news. Just the distant clang of the church bell telling you someone either got married or died. Your village has 82 people, 83 if you count the old woman who may or may not be a ghost. The sky is grey, your hands are calloused, and your main concerns are, will it rain again? Do you have enough onions? Why is everyone coughing? You've heard whispers, hushed ones, about something sweeping through the next town. No one calls it plague. That's a fancy Latin word the monks mumble when they write. What you hear is the sickness, or more ominously, it's come. Now, here's the kicker. You have no clue what causes it. No one does. The concept of germs, total mystery. You think illness comes from bad air, or maybe from sin. A guy down the road says it's because the stars are misaligned. Another says it's punishment for that one time the town skipped mass. Everyone agrees on one thing. It's not good. You head home. Your cottage leans slightly to one side, like it's tired of existing. Inside, there's straw on the floor, smoke in the air, and a strange smell that could be mold, goat, or both. You hang your wet cloak near the fire, where it drips into the pot of soup. Well, soup is generous. It's hot water with cabbage ambition. Your neighbor bursts in without knocking, because medieval doors are more concept than structure, and he's pale. Thomas the Weaver, he says. He's coughing blood. You freeze. Thomas is 2 huts away. That's close. Like share a bucket close. You go to bed anyway, because what else can you do? No one's invented Tylenol, or hazmat suits, or boundaries. You pull a wool blanket over your head and hope that somehow tomorrow will be less terrifying. You sneeze. You tell yourself it's just the smoke. Probably now. Here's a strange little fact. Medieval people didn't even link sickness with other sick people. The idea that disease might spread from person to person was debated. Some said yes, others thought that was just superstition on top of superstition. Scholars, if you can call guys who write on cowhide, scholars argued about it constantly. Some believed in something called miasma, bad air. It was a powerful idea. If the air smells bad, it must be bad. And if that's true, then covering your nose with herbs should work. Logical, right? So you wake up the next day and shove some rosemary up your nose, just in case a chicken walks across your bed. It's that kind of morning. You step outside and everything feels off. Too quiet. The blacksmith hasn't started banging yet. That only happens if he's drunk or dead. Possibly both. You meet a small group gathered in the center of town. They're talking in circles. Some suggest ringing the church bell non-stop to scare the sickness away. Others say to burn a bundle of herbs. One guy recommends rubbing raw onions under your armpits. You volunteer to ring the bell. At least that's clean. That night, you eat soup again, this time with actual leeks, an upgrade. You hear coughing through the walls. You tell yourself it's fine. It's just the cold. People cough all the time, right? Right. By the way, there's a theory still debated by historians that the plague entered Europe not just through ships and rats, but possibly even through trade winds. Yes, actual wind. Miasma believers would have felt very vindicated. So there you are, day 2, alive, nervous, but alive. You don't know what's coming, but you smell like rosemary and soup. That has to count for something. The morning light drips through the cracks in your wooden shutters like watery honey. Birds chirp, but even they sound unsure. Outside, you hear it again. Gong, gong, gong. The church bell, it's been ringing more than usual lately. Not for weddings, not even for Sunday Mass. It's the pleasy-sevs from Twesift kind of bell. You tie your belt, throw a rag over your shoulders for warmth, and head out. Someone in the village decided the bell should be rung once every hour to ward off the sickness. You're not sure how sound waves are supposed to stop people from dying, but hey, people have tried worse. At the church, Father Edric looks like he hasn't slept since Tuesday. His robe is stained, his eyes sunken, but he still stands at the altar, arms raised, chanting Latin phrases that sound like they were made to bounce off stone walls and into your spine. You kneel like everyone else, on cold flagstone that sends tiny stabs of chill up your legs. The lady beside you is crying. Her hands tremble as she clutches a wooden rosary that's been rubbed so much it's smoother than glass. You whisper your own prayer, not because you know it'll work, but because everyone else is doing it, and honestly, you don't want to be the only one who skipped the magical firewall. Then the incense starts. Thick clouds of frankincense swirl around the altar. The priest sways, chanting harder, faster. You cough a little, echoes. The smoke is dense a bit. No one seems to notice. In fact, a kid behind you leans forward and whispers, "If you cough too much, they make you leave." You immediately stop coughing, even if you're dying. Now, here's the fascinating bit. People believed prayers created actual protective bubbles, not just spiritually, but physically. It was common thought that singing hymns and lighting candles in holy places changed the air quality. Cleaner air equals no disease. Logical leap, maybe. But when your friend just died from looking tired yesterday, you're willing to believe anything. And so, as the choir sings off-key and Father Edric swings his incense like a holy sword, you feel a strange mix of fear and calm. If this is what keeps the plague away, you're in it. You're all in. After the service, you stay to scrub the pews. Cows. Acts of cleanliness are acts of holiness. At least, that's what Edric says. So you and a few others wipe down benches with vinegar and wine, which smells sadly festive. Someone starts talking about relics again. Apparently, St. Cuthbert's toe bone is arriving next week. A man from the next village is walking it here, in a golden box, and when it arrives, everyone's supposed to touch it. That's right, touch a 300-year-old holy foot bone, and you'll be protected. You glance at your hands. They've touched slugs, pigs, and at least one mystery puddle today. Honestly, what's one more thing? And yes, historians still debate how effective the church really was in preventing plague. On one hand, it provided hope and structure. On the other hand, crowds. Lots of crowds. People crammed together, breathing the same air, singing, crying, and occasionally sneezing right into each other's faces. You walk home under a sky that looks too big. Everything feels heavy. But you carry a small candle from the church with you. People say, if it stays lit, you're safe. It blows out halfway down the path. You relight it. Just in case at home, your mother rubs your chest with warmed goose fat and whispers a prayer. Your brother insists he saw an angel in the clouds. Your uncle won't stop ringing a handbell because he believes it scares off bad spirits. You lie, down on straw that pokes you in all the wrong places, thinking, if enough people believe in something, does it start to work? The stars blink overhead like they're trying to tell you something. Probably something in Latin. You fall asleep too. The sound of another church bell in the distance. Either another prayer, another death. The next morning smells like smoke, wet moss, and something sharp, almost metallic. Your neighbor told you there's a traveling apothecary setting up just past the town well. That's a big deal. These folks don't come around unless things are bad or about to get worse. Either way, you're curious. You follow the thin trail of voices until you reach a stall that looks like a collapsing bookshelf. Jars, bundles, and wrinkled scrolls teeter on wooden planks. The man behind it all wears 5 different pouches, 3 layers of wool, and a hat shaped like a mushroom. You're not sure if that's intentional. He doesn't say hello. He just holds out a small drawstring pouch and says, "This one's good for avoiding death." You take it. It smells like burnt sage, vinegar, and frog. You ask what's in it. He smiles in a way that doesn't feel reassuring and says, "Protection." You blink. He elaborates. Dried rose petals, crushed emerald, which is suspiciously green sand, and powdered toad thigh. You put the pouch down very, very slowly. Now here's the thing. Apothecaries weren't quite doctors, and definitely not wizards, but they were somewhere in between. They mixed herbs, minerals, animal bits, and hope into things people could chew, smear, or boil. Some of it worked, most of it didn't. But the important part, they looked like they knew what they were doing. You ask for something less, Toady. He gives you a plague prevention paste. It's greenish brown, sticky, and smells like someone tried to pickle a fireplace. You're told to rub it on your chest and under your tongue. Not at the same time, preferably. A woman nearby asks if she can buy something for her goats. He hands her a twig wrapped in ribbon. It jingles when she walks away. You're not sure if it's medicine or a musical instrument. Later, you learn that one of the most popular plague remedies was something called thyak, a concoction with up to 64 ingredients, including cinnamon, viper flesh, and opium. People believed it cured anything, from plague to heartbreak. It was expensive, complex, and entirely based on vibes. You finally settle on a bundle of dried herbs tied with twine, rosemary, sage, and wormwood. The apothecary tells you to hang it above your bed, boil it into tea, and possibly bathe with it under the full moon. He's vague on the timing, but very clear that it must not touch iron. You have no idea why. You hand over a small coin-probally. More than it's worth, but he throws in a free beeswax candle for blessings. You walk home clutching your new purchase like it's made of gold. Now let's take a moment to appreciate a truly bizarre fact. Some medieval people believed amulets made from crushed unicorn horn could prevent plague. Of course, unicorns weren't real, so most unicorn horn was actually narwhal tusk imported from the Arctic. Talk about expensive superstition. Back at your cottage, Your family gathers around as you unpack your mysterious loot. Your sister tries to eat the herbs. Your grandmother says it smells like Tuesday. You light the beeswax candle. It flickers like it knows something you don't. You hang the herb bundle above the door. Someone sneezes. Everyone freezes. Then your brother loudly declares he doesn't believe in herbs, apothecaries, or unicorn horns. He's going to rely on prayer and beer. You suspect he just likes beer. You brew some of the herbs into a tea. It tastes like boiled regret. You sip anyway. That night, the candle burns low, casting weird shadows on the wall. One of them looks like a dragon. Or maybe that's just your exhaustion talking. You roll over, tuck the herb pouch under your pillow, and try to forget that your neighbor coughed so hard today. He fell off a stool. And here's something strange. Historians still argue over whether these remedies had any real effect. Some herbs did have antibacterial properties. Others were just glorified air fresheners. The placebo effect, definitely in play, even if no one called it that. As you drift off to sleep, your last thought is, if toad powder keeps me alive, I'll take 2. You wake up to a commotion. Not the usual goat stuck in a butt kind. This sounds official. Someone shouting near the village entrance. You rub your eyes, grab your cloak, still damp from last night, and shuffle outside. There he is, tall, cloaked in black, hat wide as a dinner, plate and 10th mask, a long curved beak like a giant crow, shiny and slightly terrifying. Glassy round eye holes, unblinking. He looks less like a doctor and more like someone who got lost on the way to a masquerade ball and just decided to treat the dying while he was at it. You don't know it yet, but this is a plague doctor. He's the best medical technology 14th century Europe can offer, which is saying something. Everyone whispers as he walks past. No one gets too close. Except your neighbor's kid, who tries to poke the beak. His mother practically tackles him. You follow from a distance as the birdman enters Thomas the Weaver's hut. He's in there a while. When he comes out, he nods solemnly and tosses something into the fire pit. Possibly the rag Thomas used as a handkerchief, or his socks. No one's really sure. The village elder approaches him, nervously wringing his cap. So, is it the plague? He asks. The doctor doesn't respond, just writes something in a leather-bound book and turns away. Now, let's pause for context. That outfit, it's not just for style. The beak mask was stuffed with herbs, believed to purify the air before it entered the doctor's nose. Remember, everyone thinks disease travels through bad smells or miasma. So naturally, wearing a mini herb garden on your face seems reasonable. Inside the beak, you'd often find lavender, mint, cloves, or even vinegar-soaked sponges. Think of it as the Middle Ages version of a scented face filter. And the long, black cloak, waxed to repel infected fluids. Yes, fluids. You shudder at the thought. The gloves. To avoid touching cursed skin, the cane. Not just for walking, it was used to poke patients from a distance. Nothing says compassion like a medically approved boop stick. Back in the village, you overhear the doctor telling someone to burn the linens, close the windows, and pray harder. Solid advice, if vague. You inch closer. He turns, his birdy face toward you. It's impossible to tell what he's thinking. Probably, please stop staring. You nod awkwardly and back away. Later, you learn his name is Master Florin. He came from a city 2 days' ride away, paid by some regional lord to monitor rural outbreaks. He's treated at least 5 villagers. You wonder how many of those are still on the map. That evening, you gather with the others near the communal fire pit. Everyone's on edge. Master Florin is mixing something in a metal bowl. It smells like mint and horror. He hands out little cloth squares soaked in the stuff. You're to hold it to your face when near the sick. He says through his mask, voice muffled and echoey. Don't remove it until you're alone or outdoors. Someone asks if it works. He pauses, then says, it's better than nothing. This, dear listener, is what we now call a medieval medical disclaimer. Now here's a fun fact you probably didn't expect. Many plague doctors weren't even trained in medicine. Some were barbers, butchers, or just people willing to wear the outfit. The costume became so symbolic that cities would sometimes hire anyone willing to don the getup. Just to reassure the public. Academic circles still argue over whether these doctors helped more than they harmed. Some likely made a difference, especially those who enforced basic quarantines. Others were glorified note-takers with terrifying fashion sense. Back in your cottage, you light a candle, sniff your herb pouch, and try not to think about how your town now has a literal plague doctor. You feel both safer and way more nervous. Your younger sister asks if he's going to fix the village. You say yes, because sometimes lying kindly is the best medicine available. You lie in bed wondering what it feels like to wear a mask. That smells like thyme and vinegar all day. You wonder if Master Florin ever takes it off. You wonder if he's seen something far worse than this already. The fire crackles. The wind shifts. Outside, the bell rings again. So, you're sitting on a stool, slightly nervous, shirt off, sleeve rolled up, and there's a chicken staring at you through the window. Not judging, just observing. Across from you, a man with the hands of someone who's either dug 100 graves or wrestled a tree is prepping a blade. A clean blade, if you're lucky. Today, you're getting your blood let. Yes, on purpose. This isn't punishment. This isn't even dramatic. It's actually one of the most normal medical practices of your time. You feel dizzy just thinking about it, which is ironic, considering you're about to lose a bit of blood. See, back in medieval Europe, people believed the body was governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. When one of these was out of balance, you got sick. Too melancholy, that's too much black bile. Too angry, must be yellow bile acting up. Feverish, clearly, you've got excess blood. Solution, remove some. Hence, bloodletting. Your practitioner today isn't exactly a doctor, more like a barber surgeon. Yes, the same man who cuts your hair, pulls teeth, and lances boils is also in charge of managing your internal fluids. Multi-talented, really. He ties a strip of cloth tightly around your arm. You look away. He asks if you want a prayer said. You say yes, mostly to stall. He murmurs something in Latin. Could be a blessing, could be a pasta recipe, and slices a tiny vein in your arm. The blood oozes into a ceramic bowl. It smells metallic and warm. You try not to faint. He watches the bowl like a chef reducing a sauce. At a certain point, he nods and stops the flow with a wad of wool and vinegar-soaked linen. You're told not to bathe for 3 days, avoid garlic, and sleep with your head higher than your feet. You feel lighter, not in a spiritual way, more like your knees forgot how to exist. Now, if you're wondering, did this actually help? Well, that's a centuries-long debate. Bloodletting sometimes lowered fevers and reduced inflammation, but it also weakened people, especially those already sick. It became one of the go-to treatments for plague. Alongside praying, vomiting on purpose, and putting cut onions near the windows, fun combo. In some towns, people lined up for it, not just the sick, but the healthy, hoping to rebalance before illness struck. Kind of like getting a flu shot, if the flu shot involved losing half a pint of blood and the distinct possibility of sepsis. But wait, it gets weirder. In wealthier places, doctors used leeches for bloodletting. Live ones. They'd pop them onto your skin and let them slurp away until bloated. Kids would collect them from rivers like morbid Pokemon. Some thought they were gentler than blades. Others just liked not holding a bowl of blood. You, on the other hand, don't have leeches. You've got a rough cloth, a sore arm, and a man offering you a warm beer for your bravery. You drink it slowly. It tastes like sadness, but it's better than nothing. As you walk home, arm throbbing slightly, you pass Thomas the weaver's hut. It's silent now. A cloth has been pinned over the door. You don't ask back at home. Your mother pats your face and says you look less inflamed. You lie down, elevated pillow and all, and stare at the ceiling beams. You start wondering who decided this was a good idea. The answer lies far back, with ancient Greek physician Galen, whose theories were still gospel in the 1300s. Even though he lived over 1,000 years earlier, his work shaped medieval medicine like duct tape shapes last-minute repairs. Modern historians still argue whether bloodletting did more harm than good. There are records of people recovering after treatment, sure, but there are also plenty of folks who, shall we say, did not dot as the fire crackles and your body adjusts to its new blood levels. You feel slightly dizzy but oddly proud. You did something. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. Either way, you've earned the right to sleep with both eyes closed. Tonight, unless someone starts coughing again. It starts with a smell. Not a bad smell necessarily, just thick. The kind of air you can chew a little before you breathe it in. Smoke, sweat, dirt, wet hay, rotting apples, and whatever your neighbor's been boiling for the past 6 hours. You tug your sleeve over your nose and try to act casual, because, in your world, smell equals danger. The logic goes like this. If it stinks, it must be sick. If it's sweet, it must be safe. This is the age of miasma theory, the belief that disease travels through bad air. Not germs, not particles, not invisible microbes, just general grossness floating around like an evil perfume. So naturally, your job today is air maintenance. Your mother hands you a bundle of herbs tied with twine, rosemary, lavender, and something that looks suspiciously like dried celery. You're told to wave it around the house, especially near doorways, windows, and your brother's feet. You do so with great theatrical flair, like a holy air wizard. Now, the entire house smells like a salad that caught fire, which is an improvement. Honestly, later, you help your uncle light a purifying fire in the middle of the street. People toss in dried citrus peels, pine branches, and occasionally a damp rag soaked in vinegar. The smoke is intense, teary-eye intense, but the hope is that it'll chase away whatever invisible evil is floating by. And this is not just a village thing. In big cities, entire neighborhoods are ordered to burn aromatic woods, juniper, sandalwood, even cinnamon if you're fancy. Not for warmth, for survival. If you walk through a city street, you'll see smog not from industry, but from pure, fragrant panic. Even the town hall's been scented. Someone installed bowls of dried lavender and clove oil near the doors. You almost mistake it for a bakery until you hear someone coughing behind the walls. And here's the thing. Some of these methods actually had mild antibacterial effects. Smoke from certain plants, especially those with volatile oils, might have reduced airborne pathogens a tiny bit. But that's a modern hindsight. At the time, people just knew if it stank, you had to stank harder back. You pass a group of children wearing small cloth sachets around their necks. Inside, crushed rose petals, myrrh resin, and orange peel. They call them scent shields. It's adorable and tragic. Adults go further. A merchant you know shoves an entire onion into his shirt pocket every day, not to eat, just to suck in the poison air. He now constantly smells like a soup in progress. He also hasn't gotten sick yet. Coincidence? Entirely possible. He tells everyone it's the onion. Historians now argue it was probably luck. At the edge of town, you spot a man with a long pole sticking out from his backpack. At the end of the pole dangles a ball of cloth soaked in vinegar and pine oil. He walks slowly, letting it trail through the air like a bizarre fishing rod. It's supposed to scoop the badness. No one questions it. There's even talk of bell ringers and town criers walking with pans of smoldering herbs, waving them like mosquito coils, warding off the invisible. One particularly enthusiastic fellow walks in circles, ringing a bell and shouting, "Fresh air for sale." You admire his branding. At home, your grandmother is boiling vinegar on the stove. To clean the air, she says, waving a ladle like a weapon. Your sister tries to stick her head over the pot. You pull her back before she steams her eyebrows off. Then comes the strangest tip of the day. Your neighbor, a woman who once tried to cure hiccups by hiding in a barrel, tells you to press a live pigeon to your armpit. Apparently, the bird will draw out the poison. She even offers you a pigeon. You politely decline. The bird looks relieved. But wait, it gets better. You hear that in Venice. They've started carrying posies of flowers under their noses whenever they go outside. Not to enjoy them, strictly survival gear. It's the origin of that little plague rhyme, "Ring-a-ring, O roses." Creepy, right? Academic debates continue to this day. Did people really believe air itself was the enemy? The answer is yes. Miasma theory dominated for centuries. It even lasted after microscopes were invented. The idea of invisible bad air was easier to grasp than tiny, invisible life forms that looked like angry beans under glass. You sit on your porch, watching the sun begin to dip, smelling of 10 herbs, 5 types of smoke, and 1 poorly washed tunic. You feel protected, or at least you feel like you've done something. The air shifts, cool wind, fresh breeze. You breathe in deep, smells like pine, and just the faintest trace of roasted onion. You smile, maybe it's working, maybe it's not, but it sure beats pressing a pigeon to your pits. It starts with a drum beat, not from the church, not from the tavern, but right in the town square. You wander over, curious, because something about it feels soft. And then you see them, a dozen people dancing in broad daylight. No music, no drinks. Just a wide-eyed, frenzied flailing that looks halfway between joy and collapse. You blink. One woman spins in place until she falls flat. She stays down only a moment before jolting back up, like someone pressed an invisible reset button. Another man is laughing and crying at the same time. His feet blur against the ground. A small crowd gathers, not cheering, not clapping, just watching. Some look worried. Others start tapping their own feet. You turn to the nearest baker, who mutters, "It's happening again, again." Welcome to the strange, true, and still unexplained world of plague-era dancing mania. Yes, dancing. As a response to sickness, not just as distraction or therapy, but as a legitimately believed cure. And depending on where you lived in medieval Europe, Strasbourg, Flanders, you might have seen dozens, even hundreds, take to the streets, shaking and stomping like their lives depended on it. Some records say people danced for hours, others say days until their feet bled. In rare cases, they kept going until they collapsed and allegedly died. And no, this isn't a fairy tale. You hear rumors that it started with a single woman. She couldn't stop. Others joined in. And before anyone could say possessed, the whole square was a writhing blur of elbows and panic. City officials didn't know what to do, so they hired musicians to complete the ritual. Maybe if you dance long enough, the illness dances out of you. You inch away, unsure whether you should call a priest or join in. By evening, the crowd has doubled. Someone drags in a fiddle. The players are half terrified, half committed to the G-I-G. You swear you hear one mutter, "They didn't warn me this was exorcism rates." You ask your uncle if it's safe to watch. He shrugs and says, "Better than bleeding yourself." You spent most of the night watching the dancers sway, spin, leap, stumble. Some look joyous. Some look like they're trying to outrun something only they can see. Now let's talk theories. Modern scholars have no consensus on what this phenomenon actually was. Some say mass hysteria. Others suggest ergot poisoning, a hallucinogenic mold that grows on damp rye. Others point to stress, starvation, religious fervor, or all of the above. What's important is that people believed it helped. The motion, the exhaustion, the group catharsis. Maybe it didn't cure the plague, but it let them feel something other than fear. You ask your aunt if she's ever danced like that. She frowns. "I did once, at my wedding." Same look in my eyes. Probably. The next morning, the dancers are still going. Slower now, more swaying than spinning. Someone has brought out bread and water. You spot one man, bare-chested and red-faced, twirling gently with a chicken under his arm. You think that can't be part of the cure, and yet to allow you to argue. Some villages even built temporary dance platforms for outbreaks like this. A bizarre blend of party and public health strategy. If the sickness is in the spirit, you've got to shake it loose. And if you fall over, well, at least you fell with style. Not everyone supports it though. A few local priests are furious. They say this looks more like pagan ritual than Christian healing. They start sprinkling holy water in the square. The dancers dodge it like it's rain. One priest slips. Irony noted. Back home, your younger brother is practicing little kicks in the kitchen. He says he's preparing just in case. Your grandmother ties herbs to his ankles and tells him, "If you're gonna dance, do it clean." As the sun sets again, the music shifts, slower, sadder. A single flute echoes off the stones. You watch a woman spin one last time before collapsing, laughing softly into the dirt. Someone helps her up. No one knows if she feels better, but her eyes are clearer now, and you think maybe she does. You curl up in bed that night with a cramp in your side from chuckling. Today's cure was dancing. Yesterday's was toad paste. You're beginning to wonder if medieval medicine is secretly a game of dare. Still, you fall asleep humming the flute's tune. Maybe the body knows things the brain can't explain. Maybe movement is magic. Or maybe variants just deeply, deeply tired. Section 8 Spices were the medieval N95. You wake up to your sister shoving something under your nose. It smells like cinnamon and regret. What is that? You ask, backing away like she just offered you dragon dung. It's protective, she says brightly. holding up a cloth pouch the size of a walnut. Inside, clove, nutmeg, crushed peppercorn, and a few mystery items she refuses to identify. Mama says if we all smell like a bakery, the plague won't want us. You can't argue with that logic. If you were death incarnate, would you bother anyone who smells like gingerbread? So, you tie the pouch around your neck and instantly feel delicious. The village now smells like a confused spice market, and that's on purpose. See, people in your time believe scent isn't just pleasant, it's armor, specifically aromatic. Armor, according to miasma theory, disease travels through foul air. But what can block foul air? That's right, better air. And where do you get better air? Spices, baby-rich people hang pomander-metal orbs filled with herbs and spice off their belts. Think of them as medieval AirPods, but instead of music, you're getting cloves straight to the brain. You don't have a fancy orb, but your cousin does. He's obnoxiously proud of it. It's engraved with a lion and rattles when he walks. He claims it keeps sickness 6 paces away. You're not sure if that's science or ego. You do your own spice audit. In the kitchen, garlic drying on strings. Under your bed, rosemary says, in the soup pot, onions, thyme, and something that smells like feet. Your mother adds a cinnamon stick. Not for taste, for protection at this point. Your family's dinner smells like mulled wine mixed with despair. And here's the thing, spices weren't just common. They were luxury items. Clove came from Indonesia, cinnamon from Ceylon, black pepper from India. To have these in your cupboard meant status. To rub them into your linens, steep them in your drinks, or stuff them in your pillows meant you were fighting back against the invisible enemy with everything you hated, everything you could barely afford. The local apothecary now sells plague powder, which turns out to be mostly ground cinnamon, pepper, ginger, and tragically overpriced nutmeg. People sprinkle it into wine, mix it into vinegar, or roll it into little balls and swallow them whole. You try one, it burns going down. You immediately regret your life choices. At the marketplace, a vendor is selling cinnamon candles, 3, 4, a silver piece. You ask if they work. He shrugs. They're festive. Meanwhile, some doctors claim that placing spice mixtures in the corners of rooms purifies the air. In more dramatic cases, entire houses are fumigated by throwing rosemary, sage, and pine needles into the fireplace and letting the whole house fill with choking. Herbal fog. Your friend tried that yesterday. He's now coughing less, but that might be because he moved into the shed to escape the smell. Spices also become potion. People sew clove bundles into hat brims. Girls weave lavender into their braids. One enterprising baker dusts her loaves with star anise and calls it blessed bread. People buy it in panic. You're still not sure it tastes good. Now, for a strange twist. Some records show people believed spices not only blocked disease, but confused it, as if the plague is a scent-driven monster, wandering around sniffing for its next target. And your coriander-soaked shirt is enough to throw it off your trail. Honestly, it's not the worst idea. You try wearing 2 pouches one day, one with thyme and one with vinegar-soaked cotton. You now smell like pickled forest, but people give you space on the road, which is a benefit in itself. Later that week, your town hosts a spice market day. It's not for trade, it's for defense. People bring what they can: bay leaves, fennel, dried orange peels. Everything is laid out on long tables, and you walk through slowly, inhaling deeply. It's like a defensive buffet. Even Father Edric shows up, sniffing a bundle of myrrh with cautious approval. Still, not everyone's convinced. A man from the outskirts scoffs, waving his hands. "What's next?" he says. "Garlic shoes, pepper hats." You don't tell him your aunt already made those and wears them. That night, your room glows with candlelight and smells faintly of cinnamon toast. You feel vaguely festive, faintly nauseous, and quietly hopeful. You drift off to sleep with a sprig of mint under your pillow. Some historians believe the obsession with spices actually helped not by blocking disease, but by encouraging people to clean air out rooms and avoid foul-smelling, overcrowded spaces. Others say it was mostly psychological, a placebo dressed as a bakery. You don't care. You're warm, you're breathing, you're fragrant, and for tonight, that's enough. You're packing a bundle, a hunk of bread, a wedge of cheese, 3 onions, a dried pear, and your cousin's weird little spoon with a face carved on the handle. You don't ask why he insists you take it. For luck, he says. You shrug and stuff it in. Asterisk today, you're moving out. Not just you, either. Half the town is talking about leaving, some already gone, some half gone, some stuck arguing whether chickens should be counted as passengers. Why the sudden exodus? It's not taxes, it's not politics, it's the smell, well, the smell and the death. Asterisk people have started saying things like, too many bodies, not enough dirt. And while no one really says plague out loud, the signs are there. Covered doors, quiet streets, that thick silence you only hear when everyone's afraid to breathe. So, like many others, you decide the best way to survive is to get far, away from other people. Now, let's be clear, this isn't a medieval road trip movie. You don't have a map, a compass, or travel snacks. What you have is a donkey with trust issues and a vague idea that countryside equals cleaner air. Because remember, in your world, cities are disease factories. They're crowded, no sewers, trash in the street, chamber pots flying from upper windows, people packed into alleys like old carrots in a barrel. Everyone breathing everyone else's breath, coughing, sweating, spitting. It's not exactly hygienic. There's even a common phrase, the city is a coffin with windows. Charming, you walk past your local butcher shop, closed, the inn, abandoned. A cat darts across the square, carrying something unidentifiable. You decide not to look closely. Out at the edge of town, you join a small group of fellow a baker's family, a nun who carries 5 jugs of vinegar, and a musician who insists on bringing his lute, even though no one asked him to. You head into the hills, the first thing you notice. The air really is different. It doesn't smell like boiling cabbage and ash. It smells like pine, grass, distant sheep. You actually take a deep breath without flinching. Already worth the walk. By nightfall, you set up near a crumbling stone barn. Everyone shares food. The nun sprinkles vinegar around the perimeter for safety. The lute player sings a ballad about a knight who married a tree. No one asks. For an encore the next morning, you feel almost human. This is the strategy of the wealthy. To flee to the countryside, hole up in a villa, avoid everyone. That's what the Decameron is all about. 10 people escaping plague-ridden Florence by telling stories in a country house. They have wine, poetry, clean sheets. You have onions and dirt. But the principle's the same. It's not just fear, it's logic. Fewer people equals less disease. Especially if you're already sick of the way the local apothecary keeps trying to sell you squirrel-lung elixirs. You help build a fire. Lay down straw. Boil water with a sprig of mint you forgot you had in your pocket. Someone starts writing a list of who's in the group. It turns into a sort of contract. No visitors, no sick people, no rumors. And if anyone sneezes into the woods with them, temporarily at least, this might be the most organized your life has ever been. Now, historians debate just how effective fleeing the city was. Some argue it delayed the inevitable. Others say it dramatically improved survival odds, especially for those who followed rudimentary quarantine rules. Of course, if one person brought the illness with them, well, game over. But you don't think about that now. You think about the stars overhead, unblocked by chimney smoke. You think about the donkey, now asleep and snoring. You think about how the lute player finally shut up. You fall asleep to wind in. The trees, not bell tolls or coughing. And that feels like victory. It starts with a scream. Not a terrified scream, more like an angry one. You sprint down the dirt path toward the sound and nearly trip over a sack. It's moving. Someone's yelling about evil omens. Another is shouting about witches. Then, from the edge of the crowd, you spot it. A black cat sprinting out of the chaos, tail puffed like a bottle brush. The villagers chase it. Someone throws a stick. Someone else throws a shoe. You stand there, baffled, until a hunched old man leans toward you and whispers. They say the plague rides on their backs. You stare. The plague. He nods. And sometimes demons. You blink on cats. He nods again, very seriously, then adds, especially the black ones. They're sneaky. You begin to realize you've just stumbled into one of the more absurd chapters of medieval public health, the Great Cat Persecution. C. In times of confusion and terror, people don't always respond with logic. Sometimes they respond with superstition, symbolism, and wildly misplaced blame. And during the plagues, cats became scapegoat number one, especially black ones. The belief was that cats, being slinky, mysterious, nocturnal, and independent, must be involved in dark magic. Maybe they were witches in disguise. Maybe they were messengers for the devil. Maybe they just looked at people the wrong way. Whatever the reason, they were seen as bad luck incarnate. You remember your grandmother once said, if a black cat crosses your path, walk backward until it forgets you exist. At the time, you thought it was nonsense. Now, people are setting traps. You try to defend the local tabby who once ate your socks. He only brings us mice, you say. Someone replies, exactly. They bring things. Now, here's the dark irony. Cats actually helped control the rat population, which was a major vector for plague. By killing cats, people unknowingly gave rats free rein to party in the grain stores and flea nests. That's right. The very thing that might have helped reduce plague spread was being systematically destroyed. But back then, no one knows about bacteria. No one knows about fleas. No one knows that rats carry Yersinia pestis in their bloodstreams and that fleas hop from rodent to human-like disease delivery boys. They just see a lot of death and a lot of cats. And in a world where symbolism is everything, that's enough. You hear rumors from nearby towns, entire cat colonies drowned in wells, people lining up to throw felines into bonfires for safety. One noble even orders a cat exorcism, a priest with holy water and a confused ginger tabby. It's a weird, weird time. Now, you love cats, always have. So you do the unthinkable. You hide one. Her name is Bristle. She's more hiss than purr, but she keeps your kitchen mouse free and your sister company. You tuck her into a straw-lined box in the barn and bribe her silence with leftover meat scraps. Each night, you sneak out to feed her. Each morning, she's still there. Somehow, that tiny continuity makes you feel like the world hasn't collapsed. Entirely one evening, though your brother almost catches you. "What's that noise?" he asks. "A ghost," you reply without missing a beat. He runs away screaming. You're proud and slightly guilty. Now, historians still debate the scale of medieval cat persecution. Some say it was isolated and exaggerated later. Others argue it was widespread, especially in places where religious fervor merged with pest-induced panic. Either way, it happened enough to be written about, and the consequences likely weren't great for public health. Ironically, centuries later, when people began understanding disease vectors, cats made a full comeback as pest controllers. But for now, they live in the shadows. Sometimes, literally. You dream one night that bristle grows to the size of a horse and saves the entire village from an army of plague rats by simply glaring at them. You wake up smiling the next morning. Someone announces that a new saint's relic is arriving, a toe bone blessed by 7 bishops. The village's focused shifts. You sigh with relief. Bristle yawns. As the sun sets, you pet her soft ears and whisper, "You're safer than the saints." Toe. She blinks slowly, clearly unimpressed. But you both know, in a time where science hides under robes and fear wears many masks, keeping a cat alive might be the bravest thing you've done all month. You're flipping through a book. Well, calling it a book is generous. It's a sheaf of stiff parchment, barely held together with gut string, covered in chicken scratch ink and strange circular diagrams. The top corner reads, "On the movements of the heavens and the influence on the fluids of man." You're not entirely sure what that means, but your uncle swears by it. He calls it his health notebook, but most of the pages look like they're tracking moon phases, planetary conjunctions, and the best days to clip your toenails. Welcome to medieval medicine, where astrology isn't just for romantic advice, it's full-blown clinical guidance. You're told that Mercury is in a hot and moist sign, so it's a bad day for sweating. Mars is in retrograde, which makes fevers worse, and Saturn, he's being a real jerk this month, aligning with Jupiter in a way that supposedly makes the humors boil. So naturally, your neighbor's son isn't allowed to drink cold water for 2 weeks. Not because he's sick, but because Venus says so. Too. Be fair, the stars do look nice tonight. You glance up and see a perfect arc of shimmering dots across the sky. Somewhere in there, apparently, lies the secret to whether your lungs will betray you tomorrow. The village astrologer, who is also the part-time carpenter and full-time gossip tours, you that the Black Death began under a rare triple conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in 1345. He points at a page where 3 angry symbols intersect inside. A hand-drawn circle. You nod like you understand. Astrology is taken so seriously that even doctors carry star charts. Before treating anyone, they'll check the zodiac sign of the moon, the birth hour of the patient, and whether Mars is in a choleric house. If it is, they might delay treatment. You ask why. They say something vague about fire and blood. And the will of the heavens. You learn a new term, iatromathematics, the blending of medical treatment and celestial math. If that sounds ridiculous, consider this. Universities taught it, and kings consulted it. Even the Pope had an astrologer. It wasn't fringe. It was the framework. You flip another page and see a bleeding calendar. It shows which body part to let blood from, depending on the moon's phase. Today it's the left ankle. You make a mental note to keep your socks on. Here's a fun twist. The book also tells you when not to bathe. Apparently, bathing during certain planetary alignments could open the pores of the soul to demonic infection. That would explain why your neighbor hasn't washed in 3 months. You hope Mars gets out of whatever house it's in soon. There's also a list of unlucky days called dies maladays, when healing is impossible. Prayers go unheard, and no bread should be baked. One of them is next week. Your aunt refuses to cook that day, so you're preparing for a fast. You hide some dried plums in your sleeve. Now, not everyone buys into this. The town priest calls it sky superstition. The barber surgeon just says, if the moon cured disease, I'd be out of business. But most people, including, you'll find it oddly comforting. Because in a world where you don't know what a bacterium is, the stars at least offer a pattern, a system, a cosmic spreadsheet. It might be flawed, but at least it doesn't cough in your face. One afternoon, you catch your brother drawing his own chart on a scrap of bark. He's decided that every time he sneezes, it's because Mars is angry. You ask what happens when he hiccups. He says, Saturn's disappointed. You both laugh so hard you forget to be afraid for a moment. Now, modern historians still argue whether astrology helped or hindered medieval medicine. Some say it provided structure, encouraging people to observe patterns and symptoms. Others argue it delayed real discovery by distracting physicians with stargazing. But here's the thing, you don't care. Not when someone you love is coughing. Not when the bell rings again. Not when the herbs don't help. You sit by candlelight that night, tracing the symbols with your finger. You whisper a small hope to Jupiter, then to Venus for good measure. You don't know who's in charge up there, but if they're listening, you're not picky. You fall asleep with the notebook tucked under your pillow, not for reading, for protection. You take a deep breath and instantly regret it. The smell hits you like a wall. Rotten vegetables, horse droppings, moldy leather, smoke, and something that might once have been fish but now just smells like ambition gone wrong. You gag, lift your sleeve to your face, and try breathing through it. It helps a little. Congratulations, you've survived another day in a medieval street. You're on your way to fetch water, walking along the village's main road, which is mostly mud with aspirations. It rained last night, so now it's a sludge, superqual, parts water, manure, and mystery lumps. You try not to step too hard or too deep. Someone ahead of you yells, "Gardez l'eau," a warning cry borrowed from the French, meaning watch the water. You don't even look up anymore. You just instinctively jump sideways. Seconds later, a bucket of waste splashes onto the road from an upper window. You're lucky, just a few drops on your sleeve. You once saw a man take the full blast. He didn't speak to anyone for 2 days, see? In this world, there's no plumbing, no sewers, no trash collection. What you have instead is gravity and hope. People toss waste from windows, leave garbage in alleys, and rely on stray dogs, pigs, and occasionally children to tidy up. You've seen toddlers playing with bones that might not be from dinner, that combined with dying animals, decaying thatch, and the fact that people don't bathe regularly, makes for an odor cocktail that never stops fermenting. So how do you deal with it? With strategy. Your friend wears a slice of lemon in a cloth under his nose. Your uncle prefers a waxy mustache soaked in wine vinegar. You once tried stuffing parsley up your nostrils. It worked until you sneezed in front of the baker. People are getting creative. One woman carries a fan made of chicken feathers. Another man sews dried sage into his hat brim. The apothecary sells nose sticks, essentially cinnamon dipped in beeswax. You buy two. Double nostrils, double defense. Then there's the smoke method. Burn something strong, juniper, garlic skins, even old shoes, and hope it overpowers the stink. The town square is always hazy now. You can't see much, but hey, at least you can't smell much either. And don't even ask about the gutters, technically. Your village has a drainage system, a shallow ditch down the middle of the street. Everything flows there. Rainwater, dishwater, pig blood, and on market days, possibly human teeth. It's sort of downhill, which helps until it doesn't. You once watched a chicken float past your house, alive, looking confused now. Here's a curious fact. Many medieval people actually believed bathing could make you sick. They thought warm water opened your pores, and through those pores, disease could sneak in. So even if you wanted to clean yourself, you might be discouraged from doing so during a plague outbreak. That's why your cousin hasn't bathed in 3 weeks and insists. That's why he's not coughing. He also smells like a haunted cheese wheel. But no one's saying anything yet. Some wealthier households fight back by laying fresh rushes or straw on their floors, sprinkled with herbs. It soaks up spills and covers smells, sort of like an old-timey Febreze rug. Problem is, no one changes it regularly, so after a while, it's just fermented filth with a floral top note. By mid-afternoon, you're back home, face covered in soot from passing someone's protective smoke barrel. Your mother hands you a damp cloth infused with vinegar. Wipe your face, she says, and don't breathe through your mouth. You'll taste the town. You nod, then open your mouth to say something and instantly regret it. Now, historians debate just how bad medieval cities really smelled. Some records suggest people were desensitized. Others describe the stench in vivid, horrified detail. But there's one thing scholars agree on. Poor sanitation made things a lot worse during plague outbreaks. Without clean water or organized waste removal, infection spread rapidly. Rats loved the garbage. Fleas loved the rats. The plague loved them both. It's a grim cycle, so what can you do? You light a clove candle. You sprinkle sage by the door. You hang your scent rag in a place of honor near the window. It flutters bravely, battling the tide, and you breathe SHLLOWLY. Very, very shallowly. That night, you lie awake, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. You hear someone cough, faintly, far away. You hear a cat hiss, a chicken squawk, a faint splash from the street. You pull your covers up and whisper a small, sour-smelling prayer. May tomorrow be less fragrant. You've seen the hat, tall, oddly conical, made of stiff wool and stitched with strange little symbols. At first you thought it was part of a festival costume, maybe something the village fool would wear on a dare, but then you noticed everyone was wearing one. The blacksmith, the midwife, even your least fashionable cousin, who once wore both shoes on the same foot. Now it's your turn. Your mother hands you your very own plague hat with great ceremony, as if it were a crown. It's protective, she says, tapping the brim twice for luck. You ask how. She looks at you like you just questioned the usefulness of bread. Because it covers your head, she says. The sickness can't crawl in that way, right? You put it on instantly. You feel taller, warmer, slightly itchy. Welcome to the latest in 14th century pandemic couture. Head coverings have officially entered the survival toolkit. In your world, the belief isn't just about fashion, it's deeply practical and deeply superstitious. A covered head equals a protected brain, and possibly a protected soul. Some people go further, pinning sprigs of rosemary or clove to their hats. Others draw small crosses on the inside with charcoal, or even smear garlic paste along the seams. Your aunt, who lives 2 towns over, reportedly wears a linen cap soaked in wine and wrapped in waxed leather. She calls it her halo of health. No one argues, and here's the thing. Hats were more than a style statement. They were a psychological shield. When fear ruled the air, people looked for anything to place between themselves and the unknown. The sky was mysterious. Illness was mysterious. The space above your eyebrows, possibly cursed, so you walk down the road, your new hat bobbing slightly, giving you the distinct silhouette of a very determined teapot. Your friend sees you and nods approvingly. He's wearing one too, though his has a feather. He claims it keeps his thoughts fresh. You don't ask follow-up questions. The village. Elders gather later to discuss the possibility of a communal hat blessing. Father Edric, ever the pragmatist, suggests everyone gather in the churchyard and face east while chanting Psalm 91 and adjusting their headgear at regular intervals. It sounds ridiculous until you realize most people are already on board. Your cousin starts making extra hats and selling them. He calls them blessment bonnets. They're the same itchy wool as yours, but he adds a button and calls it innovation. He sells out in an hour. Meanwhile, a rumor spreads. A merchant in the next town wore 2 hats, one wool, one silkened, survived, even though 5 people in his house died. The logic, silk blocks spirit winds, or maybe it's just warm. Either way, silk, sails, spike. You briefly consider sewing a pocket into your hat to hold your garlic clove. Your mother says that's overkill. Here's a wild historical fact. People once believed the crown of the head was the body's most vulnerable point, an opening through which bad air, spirits, or even celestial misalignments could enter. So, keeping it warm and sealed was essential not just against chills, but against fate. That might also explain why your neighbor is now wrapping his entire head in wool and only cutting a hole for his eyes. He looks like a slightly anxious shepherd's ghost. And don't forget the red thread trend. In some regions, people began stitching red or blue threads into their hats, cloaks, or belts. The colors were thought to confuse disease. It won't know where to land, someone explains, as if the plague is a very indecisive pigeon. That night, you hang your hat near the fire to dry. It smells like smoke and rosemary. You carefully refold the herbs inside, making sure they're positioned with intention. As your grandmother always says, you dream of a world where hats hum with energy, where brim size is directly proportional to your immune system, where the difference between life and death might be millenary. You wake up, put on your hat, and step into the morning fog, and you feel ready. Asterisk, you hear it again. Laughter, not the nervous kind people use to pretend everything's fine. No, this is real. The belly-deep kind. And it's coming from the most unexpected person, old Rafe, who hasn't changed his tunic in a season and drinks from a wooden cup he found in a ditch. You squint at him across the lane. He's leaning against a barrel, scratching his beard, surrounded by chickens, not dead, not coughing, just alive and happy, which is infuriating, really, because let's be honest, he breaks all the plague rules. He doesn't boil his herbs. He doesn't wear a hat. He bathes once a harvest. He even lets cats sit on his lap like he's inviting spiritual disaster. He smells like bread dough and livestock. And yet, here he is, still vertical, still annoying. You start noticing others, like him, the town drunk, who never remembers to wear his protective pouch but always remembers his wine. The old widow who sleeps by the open window, breathing all that bad air, and still wakes up earlier than you. Even your goat, who licked a sick child's shoe yesterday and seems perfectly fine today. Just louder. And then there's you. You with your spices, your hat, your vinegar rags, your rotating set of 3 lucky socks. You who haven't touched anyone in weeks. You who crossed yourself twice before stepping into the latrine. Still here, and you start wondering, why? Are you blessed? Lucky? Just good at avoiding other people? You ask the apothecary. He mumbles something about constitutional resilience and offers you dried beetroot as a reward. You decline. You ask the priest. He says God spares whom he will. Not helpful. You ask your aunt, who now keeps a detailed survival chart where she ranks everyone from likely cursed to suspiciously healthy. You're somewhere in the middle. Historians later would ask the same question. Why did some people like Yusuf plague after plague without even getting a sniffle? Modern theories abound. Genetics, exposure to less lethal strains, stronger immune systems, cleaner habits, dumb luck. One theory even suggests survivors might have carried a gene mutation that made them more resistant to certain pathogens. The CCR5 delta 3 to allele, for the scientifically curious. Of course, in your time, no one's heard of alleles, or genes, or immunity. They just see a pattern. Some people die. Some don't. And the don't club is weirdly random. You walk through the village and start mentally cataloguing the healthy ones, the quiet ones, the dirty ones, the ones who chant to plants, the ones who eat dried fish for breakfast. You can't find a pattern. You also notice that many survivors have 2 things in common. 1, they're always doing something. Tending to the sick, mending nets, walking the hills. They move, even when tired. 2, they're often surrounded by animals. Dogs, cats, goats. Creatures that make noise and need care and don't ask questions. Maybe that helps. Maybe not. Your grandmother says, busy hands and warm hearts survive the longest. Then she burns sage and spits into the fireplace. Mixed messaging, but you respect it. Later, you find old Rafe again. He's whittling a stick into something unrecognizable. You ask him how he stayed healthy. He shrugs. I sleep well. I drink plenty. I laugh when I can. That's it. That, and I don't worry too much. Worry pulls death toward you like a whistle. You nod slowly, unsure if he's wise or just very lucky. Maybe both. That night, you look at your hands, still steady, your breath still clear. You look at the walls of your cottage, still standing. You look at the half-eaten loaf of bread, still warm, and you realize you're surviving, not because of a potion, not because you followed every rule, but because you kept going. One day at a time. Maybe the sickness skips some people. Maybe some people are too stubborn to catch it. Or maybe the world, for reasons it doesn't explain, just lets some people live tonight. You curl up with your cat on your lap, warm tea in hand, and a tired smile on your face. Still here, still lucky. You're standing in your doorway, holding a sprig of sage in one hand and a piece of chalk in the other. You've just drawn a protective symbol over the lintel. Your grandmother insists it keeps the plague out. It's a kind of wobbly X with a loop on top. Looks vaguely like a fish doing yoga. She told you to draw it every Thursday before breakfast, because Thursday has protective bones. You didn't ask what that means, because here's the thing you've learned after all these weeks. Logic is a luxury. Superstition is survival. Everyone around you is doing it. The butcher leaves garlic at each corner of his shop. The baker won't. Need dough unless facing north. Your neighbor whispers good health. Bad spirits leave. Every time she opens her cupboard, you used to laugh. Now you whisper it too. Someone down the lane wears 3 hats now. Another person has tied a frog. Skeleton to their belt and swears it's working. You're not entirely sure if that's protection or performance art. And yes, we're at the point where people are doing absolutely everything except sitting still. You hear stories. One woman buried a loaf of bread in her garden to feed the underworld. Another man dipped his feet in wine while chanting psalms. Someone else carved little faces into carrots and talked to them like oracles. You've personally seen too. People scrape wall soot into pouches and wear them around their necks. The apothecary tried to patent it as smudge therapy. He sold out in a day. Why? Because if the sickness is invisible, random, unstoppable, then anything that feels like control becomes sacred, even if it's nonsense, even if it's weird, even if it's whispering to an onion. Every night before bed, some of these rituals might even help be reducing contact, increasing caution, or just calming nerves enough to let the body rest. Others are completely detached from cause and effect. But does that matter? You're still breathing. That's a miracle already. And you, personally, you've built your own system, a blessed hat, a spoon of vinegar in your tea. No talking before sunrise, never walking counterclockwise around the goat pen, and absolutely no sneezing near bread dough. You don't even remember why anymore, but you follow it like muscle memory. This is how you survive now, a patchwork of prayers, habits, herbs, and hunches. The line between medicine and magic has long since blurred into a smudge of smoke and chalk dust. Even Father Edric has softened his stance. Last week, you saw him tuck a rosemary sprig behind his ear. He said it was for clarity of thought. You didn't say anything, just nodded. Meanwhile, the air still hums with dread. The bells still toll, though not as often. Maybe it's easing, or maybe people have stopped reporting. Either way, your ears have learned to count the distance between one death and the next like a rhythm. And through it all, you keep sweating, breathing, blinking, cooking, sleeping, waking. There's no magic bullet, no final cure, no decisive moment where you say, I've beaten the plague. You just wake up one more morning. You boil water, you open the shutters, you light a sprig of sage and whisper, something half prayer, half muscle memory. You live despite it all. You live because of superstition, or despite it, you live through garlic necklaces, chalked doors, and whispered rhymes. You live because you're too tired not to, and somewhere inside you, a quiet knowing grows. Maybe surviving doesn't mean having all the answers. Maybe it just means staying upright long enough for the world to shift, so you step outside into the damp morning air. Breath fogging in front of you, sage smoke curling in your wake, and you think, with just a tiny smile, still here, still strange, still surviving, and now your breath slows. The sage smoke has faded. The bells have stopped. The fires in the distance are just quiet embers now. You lie down on your straw-stuffed mattress, the scratchy wool blanket pulled to your chin. A tiny clove pouch rests near your pillow, still faintly fragrant, still a little ridiculous, but somehow comforting. The air is still tonight, not cleaner, not safer, just still, and in that stillness you feel it, the quiet miracle of being you. Made it through one more day. No charts, no cures, no certainties, just motion and habit, superstition and sweat. You danced when needed. You prayed when desperate. You lit the herbs, wore the hat, whispered to the sky. You did everything and nothing, and somehow you're here. You shift slightly, pull the blanket tighter, and exhale through your nose. The smell of smoke and rosemary lingers on your sleeve, soft, familiar, human, outside. The wind taps gently on the shutters. You don't flinch this time. You close your eyes, and the world softens into dark velvet. Maybe tomorrow the air will feel lighter. Maybe not, but for now it is night, and you are still, breathing,